right, so I'm not really going to mince any words or anything. I'm just going to go ahead and show you because I'm really excited about this. This here, it's probably a little windy, but this is my latest purchase. So it is a 1973 Datsun 240Z. It was purchased actually from my neighbor who's had it. He was the original owner of the car, and I'm really excited. As you can see, I've kind of been screwing with it a little bit already. There's a couple things with it that need addressing, because I want to get it taken care of fairly quickly. One of the things was it was leaking a little bit of brake fluid. I think I've got that kind of a temporary fix, but I will need to replace the master cylinder cap because it was leaking a little bit of brake fluid. But what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to open up the hood, kind of show you a little bit around the car, just because I'm really excited. I'm going to show you guys all of this because this is going to be really cool. So under here, I've been messing with it, like I said, so I've got some stuff taped off. I'm working on this carb. But we've got 2.4 liter, inline six, the stock motor that came with this car. One noted difference, because this one is a 73. These ones, and I think the 260s have these little flat top carbs on them, and these are apparently notorious for problems, which currently mine are being problems. So there you go, you kind of go. The other little thing inside of here was this cap was a little bit loose, and the seal inside of here is busted, and I don't have a replacement available to me right now. So what I did is kind of bent these tabs in a little bit to try to help hold it down a little bit tighter. It's even still kind of loose, but a little bit tighter than it was prior. That's one thing I've been doing on this. It's really pretty clean overall. There are a few rust spots in it just because it is a 50-year-old Japanese car. But it's mostly pretty clean throughout because he's actually had it painted, I think he said twice in its lifetime. It's got killer wheels on it. I think these are just sick as can be. Because, I don't know exactly how old they are, but I imagine they're nearly as old as the car is. Inside, you've got the wood rim steering wheel, really thin. It feels so different compared to like new cars nowadays. It's got the shag, sheep wool kind of seat covers on it. Not my biggest favorite thing about the car, but you know what? It is what it is. 4-speed manual. A couple things. Well, sorry. One big thing on this. There's a pretty easy to replace bushing it. I already looked it up because there's a lot of play. Like if I put it into gear, that's in gear, so it's all over the place still. But it's a really easy fix. I looked at it; it's real easy. So that'll be something I can take care of fairly quickly on the car. Inside, it's got some little floor mats. These things, everything in here is probably like 50 years old or so. Ultimately, it's a 47-something-year-old car. Came with the car cover. Headliner's sagging a little bit, but it's no big deal. I'm really stoked on this. Yeah, it's really not too terribly much I can show you right now. I'm more or less just really excited, and I'm still working on trying to get the thing running pretty good. Because as it sits right now, you can start it up just fine, but it idles terribly. Like it's running, it feels like it's running on like 3 cylinders, which leads me to believe what the previous owner told me. I think the back carb is stuck somehow, but I've been fiddling with it for about the last probably hour and a half, 2 hours ish. Seems that the carb is sticking. My guess is that, assuming it's a fuel issue, there's something sticking in the needle and seat in the float bowl. Because I've already confirmed that there's fuel going to the carb. It's getting to the carb, and it's not really seeming to do anything. There's a few other things I've tested. I might go over this on a little bit less windy day, or maybe once I get into the garage, I'll just be able to drive it in there and kind of go through it a little bit more. But those are kind of that's the biggest issue right now. Is just I need to get it idling properly, and then by extension, because it's really down on power, like it's missing on several cylinders. So I'm really hoping to get this thing going, because my goal is to drive this down 3 days from now, I think, to a car show where I'm currently living, because I don't live here where the car's at. This is my home, but it's not my my current living arrangement. So the car's gonna be staying up here for the foreseeable future until I move to a place where I can keep it. But my goal is to get the car going and get it reliable if I can make the trip down to about an hour-long trip and back. And then from there, where I'm planning on moving to is about 2 hours away. So I want to drive it there. I don't want to have to trailer it. I'm not big on trailering cars. I've done it before. I just don't like it. It's just a personal thing. But one thing I just noticed that's really cool, just because I've never had a car this old. The oldest car I had is the Miata, which is about 30. But down here, there's your brights. I believe that's no, that's the dead pedal. I think that's the brights right there. I'm pretty sure that's how you turn the brights on in this car. You just kick them, because that's where the term "kick your brights on" that came from. You actually would kick it. So there's little things all over the car I'm really excited about. Really cool stuff that I'm gonna enjoy this. It needs some work. There's some things that I wouldn't. Pointed at nothing there. Things I don't want to keep the way that they are, simply because it needs some work. But my plan with this car is not to modify it. It's really. I don't want to. This seems way too period, and I really wanted one of these for a long time, and I got the chance at one. I'm ecstatic about it, but I don't want to take away like kind of the old feeling of it and try to make it feel more like a new car. I'd much rather just stay feeling old. So I'm not planning. I'm not planning to do anything like coilovers, or like I'm damn sure not doing a wide body on this car. Mostly just kind of like fixing it up, maintaining it, and getting it kind of looking a little better and running better, obviously. But I'm not taking away from the way it currently looks, 'cause I think it's got a really cool retro vibe. It's not a completely stock body. It does have a wing that I don't know if it's really molded in, or if it's just adhered somehow, or if it's screwed in. I'm not sure. And there's a little valance below the front bumper that's aftermarket. So I'm really excited about it. Mostly just fixes. I'm going to stop rambling, because I know I'm just rambling because I'm excited at this point. But I'll kind of keep you updated on what I'm doing. Probably going to put it into the garage here shortly and start working on there, because the wind is getting pretty bad and it's pushing against the hood. Not that I think it's going to take the hood off, but at the same time, it's like, I'm babying this thing right now. Just trying to get it going good enough, and yeah, I'm really excited. This is going to be a lot of fun. This makes 4 cars. So there's definitely going to be a lot of content on this channel, just because there's a lot of stuff to do. So I'm going to stop rambling, leave it there. I'll pick you guys back up here, hopefully if I feel pretty confident with the engine and getting it running a little bit better. If I start getting it running better, I'll let you know for sure what the issue was. So I'm going to cut it here and go to the next clip of the video. Okay, so as you can see, brought it into the garage. There's nothing forecasted as far as weather goes, but the clouds look like they're, willing to let something down if they need be. So what I'm doing in here now, again, just troubleshooting the car, trying to figure out why it is that it feels like it's running on half of its cylinders at best. Because it can't hold an idle, and it can't stay running, even on a few cylinders at least. It can't stay running without your foot in it to get some air into the car. So I'm trying to figure out kind of what's going on with that, why it's doing it. So I've started pulling some of the spark plugs. I pulled one of them before I brought the car up here. I actually tried to clean it up a little bit, see if it would help out at all. But I've got 2 more of them here. I'm hoping you can kind of see this. Here is number 5. Maybe it's kind of hard for you guys to see, but it's a little bit wet, and it smells like brake clean, because I was spraying brake clean into the back carburetor to see if it would change the idle at all while the car was running. Well, enough that I could, tell if it's like, oh, it's just not getting fuel into the carb. It didn't do that. So unless there's an issue with either A, there's no compression in the back cylinders, which wouldn't make sense because the car doesn't just randomly lose compression over, sitting. So that wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense unless, like, the timing somehow got, like, the valve timing somehow got screwed up. But I don't think that would have happened. Bob, the guy who sold it from me, would have informed me of that if he'd done anything with the car to do that. So I don't think its compression is gone. If it's not igniting, or if it's just not starting, even with gas or fuel being sprayed into it, it has to either be spark or air. So I'm looking at the spark plugs, the back ones here. Those ones are a little bit wet, so that leads me to believe that the fuel is getting through the carburetor. It's just not igniting. So I'm thinking there's something going on with the ignition in the car, because if I grab number 1 spark plug, which I've got right here, it may be kind of hard to tell, but it's a lot drier. So I really am not sure yet. But my gut is telling me that it's just not getting spark to some of the cylinders, and if it's some of the cylinders, then the carb could be working fine. It's just a matter of it not, firing on all cylinders. So I don't know if it's an intermittent issue, because I can rev the car up. It doesn't really have much power to it, but I can rev the car up and it doesn't die at a higher RPM. Once it's got some speed in it, it keeps going. So what I'm hoping is that there's just a few either bad spark plugs or some other small issue that I can get sorted, because the issue apparently came up with the car sitting. The seller said, it was running and driving fine. It was on all cylinders the last time he had it started, which could have been anywhere from a month or 2 or 3 months ago. But now it's not, obviously, or else I wouldn't be doing this. So I'm trying to figure out that. If it's a spark issue, I'm hoping I can trace it down fairly easily. It'd be a lot easier with another buddy here to kind of help me check stuff. Like I could hold the plug to the head of the engine and see if it's sparking on each cylinder, but I can't do that. So what I'm going to probably have to do is run to the parts store or run to somewhere and get a timing light, because a timing light, obviously you can use it to set the timing on the car, but if I just clamp it on any one of these cylinder plug wires, I can see if that cylinder is at least getting power through the plug, and then if it's still not running but it gets power through the plugs, or gets power through the plug wires, and it's not sparking, then it's a spark plugs. I don't know if this is, well, I'm assuming it's the correct plug for the engine, just because it threads in, but I know there's some differences between plug designs, like internal resistances and stuff like that, so it's hard for me to say for sure. I know it's an AC Delco part, the plugs that are in the car right now, which is intended for, AC Delco I believe makes mostly GM parts. They might make Datsun parts, or may have made old Datsun parts, or maybe spark plugs back in the day were all the same. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure most people recommend like NGKs, spark plugs for these old cars, or for these Datsuns. So what I'm probably going to do is try to narrow it down to if it's just the spark plugs, or if I've got an air issue with the carb. I know the throttle linkage works. I can't keep the car running and look at the carburetors actuating to know for sure if it's, because I'll show you I'll try to show you the way that these carburetors work. So these are SU carburetors. The way that these work is that you have a piston inside of here, and at the very bottom you have a needle, and the needle is shoved into the hole that the fuel comes through. So whenever the needle's all the way down, there's no fuel coming through, or a very, very small amount. That's where you adjust your idle, so you can control that. That's one of the things you control. And whenever you open the throttle blades, so whenever you open the throttle blades open, from there, the vacuum of the air getting pulled in by the engine, assuming the engine's cranking over, is going to also lift up this cylinder that's inside here, or this piston inside of here. It's going to pull it up. Because I can try to show you inside. It's going to be really dark. Let me grab my phone. 1 second. Try to make a little bit of extra light for you. Okay. So I'm going to try to kind of give you an idea in here. Because you got the choke right here. Inside of there, I'm hoping you can see that there's a kind of a wall hanging down. That's the piston. So whenever you push on the throttle when the car is running, the vacuum behind it should help to lift it up, and that's going to let air and the fuel kind of run into the engine and run the car. So if it's not the spark plugs, then that means I have to have some issue in between, or some issue of air not being able to get into the car, in between here and here. Because once it gets past here, then it's just running straight into the valves, or straight into the into the engine. And it hasn't backfired at all, so I don't think there's any issue like where it's getting spark and the timing or the valve timing's off, to where it's like, just the valves are open whenever combustion happens. Pretty confident it's not that. So what my gut is telling me now from messing with this for a little while, is that there's either a plug issue, or there's a spark issue, or there's some very obscure issue with getting air into the car. Because while I don't know, because again these are apparently problematic carburetors, if the needle and seat that allows the fuel into the bowl, and then from there that's where the needle can actuate up. I don't know if there's an issue in there, but I know at least whenever I sprayed brake clean into the intake, it didn't change RPM. So it's at least not a fuel firing issue, and that would also lead to why the carbs or the spark plugs are wet. There's fuel going in, there's just no spark happening. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clean up all the spark plugs with some really fine grit sandpaper. I've got some 800 grits sitting on top of the car right now. I'm going to try to clean them up a little bit with those, kind of get some of the gunk and shit off of it. Try to get a stronger spark if there is spark going to them. If not, from there I'm probably going to run to either O'Reilly's or nearest parts store, see if they've got a timing light for cheap, because I don't want to spend a bunch of money because I just bought the car. Money's a little tight right now, if you can believe that. But try to get that so I can identify if it is getting spark or not. Because if there's spark, assuming there's compression, and I know I'm able to get fuel into there and just not be burned, then it's got to be some weird airflow issue that I'm just not aware of, and I need to learn more on. And that's ultimately what's going to happen with this car, is I'm going to learn a lot on it. It's, certainly there's no computers or anything on it like on a newer car to deal with, but, this all just works off of physics. The only electronics in the car is for the ignition. There's no computers controlling anything. You have vacuum-operated stuff. You have switch-operated things, but everything is operating on its own, and accepting inputs. It's not processing and making decisions based on what it's reading from the engine. So we'll see what happens. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, like I said, I'm going to clean the plugs up, try that out, see if it cranks, see if it runs any better for like a second, and then if it continues to choke out after that, then there's probably a fuel issue that's then choking out the combustion chamber, covering the plugs and fuel, and it doesn't want to fire then. So it's back and forth. If you know the basic principles of a four-stroke engine, you can kind of work around and try to identify an issue. So I'm going to get back to that. I'm going to cut it here, and try to give you guys more insight once I've got a better idea on what's going on here, why it's only running on a few cylinders.